Morning, welcome to today's live video. My name is May Doldalau, and we are doing page 139 from the book Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds by Charles Mackay. So, chapter called The Alchemists, which are people who believed that you could turn gold, okay? And they believed in eternal youth and all kinds of stuff. And these stories show the madness of people, basically, a popular delusion. But let's get into it after I tell you a little bit about myself. First, yesfinanciallyfree.com is my blog. And you go there, you put in your first name, email address on the right side, and you can press a yes button that's red. And you'll get a free ebook, Working Parents Guide to Financial Freedom, sent directly to your inbox. Now, I live in Waikiki, Hawaii with my husband, Jamel, and our 7-year-old son, Jordan. Back in 2011, I had over $40,000 of credit card debts. I had a negative net worth, okay? My husband had a negative net worth, all right? But by 2016, all right, we'd improved our net worth by $500,000. We had positive net worth, okay? And we're making almost $500 a month in passive income. I quit my job. My last day was December 23rd, 2016, right? Paid off all my credit card debts by April of 2016 as well. So the reason I'm sharing this with you, and after I quit, by the way, is when I started buying property. I had never owned property before I quit my job, okay? I dreamed of it, had no idea how I was going to do it. We bought 3 properties in 3 years. We sold 1. So we have 2 properties now. So that's a brief introduction to my story. And I want to share it with you because I want you to know that if you are where I was, really clueless about money, spending, getting into debt, not really saving, not investing, hoping dreams like buying a home, buying a place to live, if you're in that situation, I understand what you're going through, and I know how to get out. I know how to succeed. I know how you can, and I might be the only one who is willing to help you because I've noticed a lot of financial advisors focus on people who already have a lot of money. I am not a financial advisor. I'm a coach. I'm a coach that empowers you to become financially successful. Yeah? So let's begin our reading. Now, I'm reading this book because it is highly recommended as a book by financial advisors to understand money and the psychology of money. And I'm coming to understand that if you understand the psychology of money, that might be an asset in itself so that you can create more money in your life. So let's begin. Cornelius Agrippa. Okay, by the way, there is a link to this ebook. Yesfinanciallyfree.com. I have a blog about this chapter. There's a link to the ebook there that skips right to the chapter. So you can just read it yourself, all right? Or skim it. I'm recording these videos during summer break while I have my son with me. But you're welcome to go through the videos yourself. There's little written summaries under each video if you want to skim and go faster. Cornelius Agrippa. This alchemist has left a distinguished reputation. The most extraordinary tales were told and believed of his powers. He could turn iron into gold by his mere word. All the spirits of the air and demons of the earth were under his command and bound to obey him in everything. He could raise from the dead the forms of great men of other days and make them appear in their habit as they lived to the gaze of the curious who had courage enough to abide their presence. He was born in Cologne in 1486. Began at an early age the study of chemistry and philosophy by some means or other, which have never been very clearly explained. He managed to impress his contemporaries with a great idea of his wonderful attainments. At the early age of 20, so great was his reputation as an alchemist that the principal adepts of Paris wrote to Cologne, inviting him to settle in France and aid them with his experience in discovering the philosopher's stone. Honors poured upon him in thick succession. He was highly esteemed by all the learned men of his time. Melanchthon speaks of him with respect and commendation. Erasmus also bears testimony in his favor, and the general voice of his age proclaimed him a light of literature and an ornament to philosophy. Some men, by dint of excessive egotism, manage to persuade their contemporaries that they are very great men indeed. They publish their acquirements so loudly in people's ears, keep up their own praises so incessantly, that the world's applause is actually taken by storm. Such seems to have been the case with Agrippa. He called himself a sublime theologian, an excellent jurisconsult, an able physician, a great philosopher, and a successful alchemist. The world at last took him at his word and thought that a man who talked so big must have some merit to recommend him, that it was indeed a great trumpet which sounded so obstreperous a blast. He was made secretary to the Emperor Maximilian, who conferred upon him the title of Chevalier, gave him the honorary command of a regiment. He afterwards became professor of Hebrew and the belles lettres at the University of Dole in France. But quarreling with the Franciscan monks upon some knotty points of divinity, he was obliged to quit the town. He took refuge in London, where he taught Hebrew and cast nativities for about a year. From London, he proceeded to Pavia, gave lectures upon the writings, real or supposed, of Hermes Trismegistus, and might have lived there in peace and honor had he not again quarreled with the clergy. By their means, his position became so disagreeable that he was glad to accept an offer made him by the magistracy of Metz to become their syndic and advocate general. Here again, his love of disputation made him enemies. The theological wiseacres of that city asserted that St. Anne had 3 husbands, in which opinion they were confirmed by the popular belief of the day. Agrippa needlessly ran afoul of this opinion, or prejudice, as he called it, and thereby lost much of his influence. Another dispute, more creditable to his character, occurred soon after, and sank him forever in the estimation of the Metzians. Humanely taking the part of a young girl who was accused of witchcraft, his enemies asserted that he was himself a sorcerer, raised such a storm over his head that he was forced to fly the city. After this, he became a physician to Louisa de Savoy, mother of King Francis I. This lady was curious to know the future, required her physician to cast her nativity. Agrippa replied that he would not encourage this idle curiosity. The result was he lost her confidence and was forthwith dismissed. If it had been through his belief in the worthlessness of astrology that he had made his answer, we might admire his honest and fearless independence. But when it is known that at the very same time he was in the constant habit of divination and fortune-telling, that he was predicting splendid success in all his undertakings to the Constable of Bourbon, we can only wonder at his thus estranging a powerful friend through mere petulance and perversity. He was about this time invited both by Henry VIII, the Eighth of England, and Margaret of Austria, governess of the Low Countries, to fix his residence in their dominions. He chose the service of the latter, by whose influence he was made historiographer to the Emperor Charles X. Unfortunately for Agrippa, he never had stability enough to remain long in one position, and offended his patrons by his restlessness and presumption. After the death of Margaret, he was imprisoned at Brussels on the charge of sorcery. He was released after a year, and quitting the country, experienced many vicissitudes. He died in great poverty in 1534, aged 48 years. While in the service of Margaret of Austria, he resided principally at Louvain, in which city he wrote his famous work on the vanity and nothingness of human knowledge. He also wrote to please his royal mistress, Treatise upon superiority of the female sex, which he dedicated to her in token of his gratitude for the favors she had heaped upon him. The reputation he left behind him in these provinces was anything but favorable. A great number of the marvelous tales that are told of him relate to this period of his life. It was said that the gold which he paid to the traders with whom he dealt always looked remarkably bright, but invariably turned into pieces of slate and stone in the course of 24 hours. Of this spurious gold he was believed to have made large quantities by the aid of the devil, who, it would appear from this, had but a very superficial knowledge of alchemy, and much less than the Maréchal de Rays gave him credit for. The Jesuit Del Rio, in his book on magic and sorcery, relates a still more extraordinary story of him. One day, Agrippa left his house at Louvain and intended to be absent for some time, gave the key of his study to his wife, with strict instructions that no one should enter it during his absence. The lady herself, strange as it may appear, had no curiosity to pry into her husband's secrets, never once thought of entering the forbidden room, but a young student who had been accommodated with an attic in the philosopher's house burned with a fierce desire to examine the study, hoping perchance that he might purloin some book or implement which would instruct him in the art of transmuting metals. The youth being handsome, eloquent, and above all highly complimentary to the charms of the lady, she was persuaded without much difficulty to lend him the key, but gave him strict orders not to remove anything. The student promised implicit obedience and entered Agrippa's study. The first object that caught his attention was a large grimoire, or book of spells, which lay open on the philosopher's desk. He sat himself down immediately and began to read. At first word he uttered, he fancied he heard a knock at the door. He listened, but all was silent. Thinking that his imagination had deceived him, he read on, when immediately a louder knock was heard, which so terrified him that he started to his feet. He tried to say, "Come in," but his tongue refused to office. He could not articulate a sound. He fixed his eyes upon the door, which slowly opened, disclosed a stranger of majestic form, but scowling features, who demanded sternly why he was summoned. "I did not summon you," said the trembling student. "You did," said the stranger, advancing angrily. "The demons are not to be invoked in vain." The student could make no reply, and the demon, enraged that one of uninitiated should have summoned him out of mere presumption, seized him by the throat and strangled him. When Agrippa returned a few days after, he found his house beset with devils. Some of them were sitting on the chimney pots, kicking up their legs in the air, while others were playing at leapfrog at the very edge of the parapet. The study was so filled with them that he found it difficult to make his way to his desk. When at last he had elbowed his way through them, he found his book open, and the student lay dead upon the floor. He saw immediately how the mischief had been done, and dismissing all the inferior imps, asked the principal demon how he could have been so rash as to kill the young man. The demon replied that he had been needlessly invoked by an insulting youth, could no less than kill him for his presumption. Agrippa reprimanded him severely and ordered him immediately to reanimate the dead body and walk about with it in the marketplace for the whole of the afternoon. The demon did so. The student revived, putting his arm through that of his unearthly murderer, walked very lovingly with him in sight of the people. At sunset, the body fell down again, cold and lifeless as before, was carried by the crowd to the hospital, it being the general opinion that he had expired in a fit of apoplexy. His conductor immediately disappeared. When the body was examined, marks of strangulation were found on the neck, prints of the long claws of the demon on various parts of it. These appearances, together with the story which soon obtained currency, that the companion of the young man had vanished in a cloud of flame and smoke, opened people's eyes to the truth. The magistrates of Louvain instituted inquiries, and the result was that Agrippa was obliged to quit the town. That's a crazy story. Other authors besides Bellerio read similar stories of this philosopher. The world in those days was always willing to believe in tales of magic and sorcery, and when, as in Agrippa's case, the alleged magician gave himself out for such and claimed credit for the wonders he worked, it is not surprising that the age should have allowed his pretensions. It was dangerous boasting, which sometimes led to the stake or the gallows, and therefore was thought to be not without foundation. Paulus Jovius, in his Eulogia Doctrum Vivorum, says that the devil, in the shape of a large black dog, attended Agrippa wherever he went. Thomas Nash, in his Adventures of Jack Wilton, relates that at the request of Lord Surrey, Erasmus, and some other learned men, Agrippa called from the grave many of the great philosophers of antiquity, among others Tully, whom he caused to redeliver his celebrated oration for Roscius. He also shewed Lord Surrey, when in Germany, an exact resemblance in a glass of his mistress, the fair Geraldine. She was represented on a couch weeping for the absence of her lover. Lord Surrey made a note of the exact time at which he saw this vision, and ascertained afterwards that his mistress was actually so employed at the very moment. To Thomas Lord Cromwell, Agrippa represented King Henry VIII hunting in Windsor Park with the principal lords of his court, and to please Emperor X, he summoned King David and King Solomon from the tomb. Naudé, in his Apology for the Great Men who have been falsely suspected of magic, takes a great deal of pains to clear Agrippa from the imputations cast upon him by Delrio, Paulus Jovius, and others such ignorant and prejudiced scribblers. Such stories demanded refutation in the days of Naudé, but they may now be safely left to decay in their own absurdity. That they should have attached, however, to the memory of a man whose claim to magic the power of making iron obey him when he told it to become gold, and who wrote such a work as that upon magic, which goes by his name, is not at all surprising. Okay, that's all for today. We're on page 143 next time. Aloha. Have a great day. Bye, guys. See you. Have a great day. Thank you so much, YouTube. Please subscribe to the channel and check out the blog post. The link is underneath this video. Aloha.